All right, so now that we've talked about the causes, let's focus on the effects. Now the effects, short term. This is after the Civil War. So why did I put the Cotton Kings on a short-term effect?
Cotton Kings were gone.
Poof. Now if they weren't killed, their power gone completely. Why was their power gone?
Nylon.
Well, because
That was part of nylon, later invention. I don't think it had, let's put that under long-term.
But
Well, I don't, because as we talked about in the cause effect with the tariffs and all with the cotton, they couldn't send it up to the north because they were now at war.
Did the cotton gin
This
have
is
anything to do
the
with it?
short-term effects after the war.
No.
well,
So what was
because-
one of the biggest things after the war? What was one of the biggest things that Lincoln is known for?
Well, this is
Free
after
slaves.
the free slaves.
Emancipation.
Slavery's gone. In order to pick cotton, you needed a large slave population to do so. And with slavery gone and done with, these Cotton Kings lost everything. Now there's another little short-term effect. During the Civil War, as we talked about, one of the northern tactics was called the Anaconda tactic, where they blockaded the South. They're no longer to sell their exports to other countries. Now, you guys read the journals about how the Queen of England actually offered aid, well, threatened to give aid to the South. So after how many years did the Civil War last again?
4.
Yep. What do you think the rest of the world did? Like I said, the South provided 80% of the world's cotton. Do you think the rest of the world kind of sat back and said, well, we'll just wait till this war's over before we start using cotton again? No, they started farming on their own. They started growing it, manufacturing things, looking for other ways to make up for it. So that huge advantage they had is gone because of the Civil War. So their main form of economic growth, gone.
Well, plus the Northern armies came through and devastated the farms and plantations.
Scorched it.
Servants marched to the sea, exactly. He didn't just scorch, he salted the earth. He went through hundreds of miles and just destroyed farmland. That was one of the short-term effects, march to the sea.
And long-term effect. Plus you're missing lots of people because they're all dead.
Ah, that's the other factor. How many people died in the Civil War?
A lot. More people were killed in the Civil War than in World War II for the Americans.
620,000 total. That's just the deaths, not the wounded. There are more casualties in the Civil War than any other war combined in United States history. Massive loss of life. And so that devastated both the North and the South. The North, it was devastating, but not as much because they had a large immigration population coming into the North. Ellis Island, they had a lot of people coming into the North. South, not so much. So these are some of the short-term effects. Now let's have some fun here. Long-term effect, nylon.
Where does the cotton gin come into this?
The cotton gin goes over about here.
No.
Cotton gin is a long-term effect. That's the invention used where they were able to expand further, where they have larger crops, more efficient working method. But yeah, that is definitely a long-term effect to the growth of slavery. Slavery's over there. But what's some of the long-term effects of the Civil War?
Rebuilding of the South. Like it took years because several cities, especially with the March of the Sea and all, cities were destroyed. So the rebuilding efforts it took years for them to rebuild.
Well, now instead of having a free labor force, you had to pay for labor to come work the farms. So that was a long-term effect. Also, another long-term effect is that they no longer had a corner on the market as far as cotton is concerned for the world. The world had moved on and the South lost their opportunity.
Now, Lincoln, as we talked about in class earlier, had a very clear plan for the South that would have made Reconstruction, in hindsight, would have been a much better deal. But what happened to Lincoln? Why was his plan not put into effect?
John Wilkes Booth killed him.
Killed him there. And now you still have, while the Cotton Kings have lost power, you still have a lot of Southern people that have influence. And with Lincoln dead, there are compromises that were made. These compromises did not eliminate slavery, they did not bring back slavery, but they definitely reduced rights. Now this is a long-term effect. Jim Crow. Does that remind anybody of any specific topics?
Isn't that a Supreme Court ruling?
Supreme Court ruling, no.
Oh, dang it.
Their Jim Crow laws were Southern laws that were legal at the time that restricted the rights of African Americans. For example, in order to vote, you'd have to pass a special test to make sure you're educated enough. A test that only African Americans had to take. Or you had to have a literacy requirement to be able to vote. There are certain laws set up to hinder their growth. Certain laws made to make it to where they couldn't own land, they couldn't. The slavery was not reintroduced, but their rights were definitely infringed on. This was one of the compromises made that led to long-term effects. Now, Jim Crow eventually led to another effect much, much later in the 1960s.
The
Yes.
Civil Rights Movement.
Exactly. So you can see where this has spanned decades, decades have been passed, even almost centuries have passed. If we go back even further to inventions like the cotton gin. This is what I'm trying to teach you guys to take away from my classes. History is not just a little one point in time that you take things away from and that's it. History expands centuries. Cause and effect. Past events feed into current causes and effects right now that we notice today. And those effects of those events lead on further on. These cause and effect spans centuries, all of human history. And like I always like to say in this class, history does not repeat itself. But if you study the patterns, it'll look pretty dang familiar sometimes. Thank you for your time.